think it's most important to go forward with the mindset of whatever your life experience is reflecting back to you. Embrace that. Sometimes it's frustrating or stressful or things are not working as well as you want them to. But if you could take it as this is my karma, my life lesson to be learned, how can I work with this and utilize this in order to heal, to grow, to evolve, to become stronger and more fully capable?
Welcome to Just Healing, where we say the quiet stuff out loud. I'm Dr. Deborah. Join us to laugh, cry, cringe, heal, not necessarily in that order. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Just Healing. We have an amazing conversation that's going to happen today about cultures and holistic healing, and we have a very special guest, and his name is Ben. So Ben, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name's Ben Oofana, and my background is pretty unusual by most people's standards. From an early age, I found myself drawn to Native Americans. And when I learned about the traditional Native doctors at the age of 14, I was thinking, if given the opportunity, this is what I'll do with my life. And so by 17, I'd taken off to Oklahoma, landed in a community of predominantly Kiowa Indians, spent many nights sitting up in peyote meetings with the Native elders, and that led to me apprenticing with one of their last surviving traditional doctors who passed on portions of his own healing gifts. And part of the training is to go through the vision quest, which typically entails 4 days and nights, no food and water, alone in the mountains. And so over the years, I started developing my practice. I parked my ass for about 2 years in college and reassembled myself after that, because it just totally dismantles your whole construct, your whole sense of self going through that intensity. And at one point, he had $30. He dropped me off in the middle of the Hopi Indian reservation and said, hitchhike to Las Vegas, make it the best you can. I was expected to survive during those months. And then later, also training with Chinese masters, Shifu Yitai Liang and Xing Yiquan, Bagua, which are what's referred to as internal martial arts. They have their roots in Taoism. Internal because there's the primary emphasis is on building this power within your body. Those who attain mastery develop this explosive internal power, so they strike, they're breaking bones or rupturing internal organs. They don't go looking for a fight, but they just develop that capacity. And for centuries, China was pretty lawless. You were your own protection if you were capable of doing so.
But tell us more about your practice, because your practice is very unique. You use a lot of holistic healing, right? To go across cultural lines. So tell us about how you work with somebody like that.
That developed over the course of years. At first, I was at a complete loss. My mentor had me assisting him as he worked with his patients. And I remember one of the first instances where there was a man who was left paralyzed from the waist down when a front end loader turned over on him. This was on the Navajo reservation. And he had blood clots in his leg. And my mentor had me doing this. And a number of the Native doctors going back over the centuries, they would do this suction either with their mouth or the end of a buffalo horn or something. And when the blood clots came out of the back of his leg, I was like in absolute shock. Like, shit, it actually worked. And because I didn't think I had any capability or anything. And then, as I said, I parked myself back in college. And around the time that I was getting near to graduation, it's like, well, financial aid's running out. There wasn't very much by that time, but I was surviving through college. And so I gradually started working with people individually. And again, there was all this doubt and like, well, what if I hurt somebody and fear? But people would reflect back to me what they were feeling, what they were experiencing. So, but over the years, this process developed where, initially it's dialogue to start with, because I want to understand what's going on. And if they're conscious, lucid, occasionally I work with people who are not, maybe family member or friend, arrange the session. But then I'm scanning the person's body. I stand in front of them. I hold my hand in front of the body, close my eyes. I'm feeling through my hands. I'm getting this internal vision. And I feel what people are carrying, their emotional wounding, trauma, other adversity they've gone through, and how that's impacted them developmentally. I see where their development is stunted. I see what resources they have, what capacities. I see and feel the stagnant emotional residue people hold in their bodies because the vast majority of people have never learned to work effectively with their emotions. They deny, distract, suppress, push it down, self medicate, or go on pharmaceuticals, whatever. And so our lived experiences and emotional responses, they need to be thoroughly digested. Most people aren't doing that great of a job at it. And so what doesn't get digested remains in the body. So I see and feel that. I feel a lot about what's manifesting in terms of uh, pathology in their body, if they're heart disease or stroke or digestive disorders and wide range of other issues. So that's the initial part. Because I went through a great deal of trauma myself growing up and struggling with these attachment wounds, there were women that showed interest in me that had a lot going for them that were probably would have made very good partners. But when you carry those attachment wounds, you form attachments to those who were disinterested, unavailable, sometimes quite abusive. And so that was like this reenactment that I was going through. And and it was evoking such excruciating pain. And I taught myself to dive into the depths of what I was feeling. And I mean, I went through a couple of years of psychotherapy, which is a critically important part of my healing and many people's healing journeys. And it gave me the cognitive understanding, but the patterns were persisting. I continued to attract the same kind of person, more of the same painful emotions. So diving into the depths of those emotions. And sometimes I would breathe for hours on end, but at a certain point it would break open and come out of my body in waves. And I could feel those unhealthy attachments dissolving, that letting go. And that was critically important. But this practice evolved. I developed many, many applications. So I have someone coming to me that, whether it's work related stress or they're struggling in their relationships or they're dealing with some kind of digestive distress, ulcerative colitis, or Crohn's disease, or IBS. Yeah, I can have them bring their awareness deep within the abdomen, and that begins to activate the body's innate healing intelligence. So that's that next stage, first dialogue, then scanning the body, then taking them into these practices. I did study hypnosis for a few years, and I could drop people into incredibly deep trance states, but I went back to mainly focusing on doing this practice as a preliminary. And also, it gave the people I work with homework to do so they could keep advancing their healing. And the main part is, like indigenous healers, work as conduits, not having modern medical interventions, and the fact that the native indigenous people lived in harmony with the forces of nature, despite the fact that they were so warlike too. but they did have that connection. And so going through experiences like the Vision Quest, sometimes you have this presence, these forces or beings come to you. And the different native doctors had the capacity to facilitate healing of different kinds of issues. Some dealt primarily with digestive or neurological issues. They were very specialized, like you have specialists in our modern day world, except working with a completely different means of healing. And so people would travel great distances, even, like the people in the northern Pueblo tribes in New Mexico would travel all the way sometimes to Arizona to work with the Hopi Indian doctors. But the fact that I carried so much trauma, and the Vision Quest was facilitating the healing of that. And there's this desire to just keep growing, keep evolving. So I've gone since 1993, I've been going back and forth like clockwork in the spring and fall. So I have people coming with such a wide range of issues. And so I'm just like, how far can I go? Just because I want to be of service to people. And also the fact that I keep evolving. And so my greatest fear is that of stagnation.
Well, let's put
And
a pin there on that. Let's put a pin right there because you said something earlier and I think people would want to explore this. You talked
yes,
about attachment, right?
yeah. Mhm.
So let's discuss that a little bit further because people don't realize there's different types of attachment. There is disorganized attachment. That's the one that's
Yeah.
really when you're traumatized, right? And then there's
Yeah.
secure, there's secure attachment, right? So that
Yeah.
means you had the best attachment to your parent and they were good, right? And then but when it's really disorganized, it's really hard to find healthy relationships. And then you can have an
Right.
avoidant attachment, right? And that's where you want to be with the parent, but you avoid them too because you don't know what's coming at you, right?
Hmm.
Well, a lot of times substance abuse and things like that. But you really want a child to have a secure attachment, and
Definitely.
repairing that as an adult is really hard. That's why you find all the things that you're used to from your childhood development.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and insecure attachment can feel like torture
Yeah.
because you so want the love, the connection,
Mhm.
and you find yourself forming attachments to individual who are that disorganized or avoidant attachment. And then when you're not getting the love, it evokes such excruciating, painful emotions.
Yes.
And yeah, that was what I struggled with.
Mhm.
I was dealing with this insecure attachment style. It was probably some disorganization. I went into psychotherapy for a few years, and that was very helpful. I kept I was so fascinated. I wanted to understand more, to really comprehend what was going on. So I had a steady diet of clinical psych textbooks. I was just absorbing them. I had a friend who was getting her master's degree and would go to Guilford Publishing and she would buy the books because she was a student, could get them at a discount. And then I'd be just devouring them. But one of the practices that I teach people, and this is critically important, and this is something that I've learned, whatever is happening in your relationships, if you can take that as a reflection of your own woundedness. I mean, sometimes we attract people just kind of randomly, especially if you're beautiful or handsome or whatever. You attract a lot more attention, but there's a much greater likelihood of partnering with people who do reflect our emotional wounding. And I fought it, I resisted it for a long time, but I taught myself to embrace what was happening and say, okay, this is reflecting my emotional wounding. This is showing me the work I need to do to heal and transform myself and to embrace my lived experience that way. And one of the practices I teach, and there are, again, many applications, but let's get specific here. You're struggling in a relationship and the person's ghosting you, is unavailable. You're getting all kinds of mixed, ambiguous signals. Close your eyes, bring that person to your awareness, see them, feel their presence, acknowledge what's happening. You know, they're off somewhere else. They're with someone else. They're not returning your call. They're whatever drama is playing out. They're saying or doing things that are hurtful. Hold them in your awareness and then notice what you feel in response to what's happening. Is it sadness, grief, longing, hurt, anger, frustration, confusion? Okay, where are those feelings situated in your body? In your throat, your abdomen, embedded deep within your chest. Bring as much awareness as you can. Dive into the depths of what you're feeling. Breathe very softly all the way down to your abdomen, expanding your abdomen and your rib cage. Pause. Exhale fully,
Mhm.
pause again, and continue the cycle. Because as you work with this practice, it activates this innate healing intelligence residing within your body and mind. And this is what helps you to begin to chew up and digest your lived experiences, your emotional responses to what you're dealing with, what's playing out in your life. The practice is critically important. I went through broken engagement, what was it, 19 years ago. I was doing the practice, but I would also flip over and do Qigong practice. And that's what I learned training with this Chinese master, Shifu Li Taoyang. And so on one hand, I'm diving into the depths of all those tense, overwhelming emotions, the grief, the sadness and loss. Then I would flip over into doing the Qigong practice, bringing that life force into my body, cycling it through my body, different pathways. And so they work together to move me through it quicker,
Mhm.
sooner than I would otherwise. We also need to understand that there are limits to our body's innate healing intelligence. And so we need to be incorporating the most effective therapeutic interventions. A lot of people have a very limited understanding of their emotional wounding, of the dysfunctional dynamics playing out. And if you do something Like I recommend, for instance, deep tissue body work because it's going to help you connect with a lot of the emotions that are stored in your body. Because a lot of us are in varying degrees of dissociation, even though we don't meet the clinical standards of someone or qualifications of someone with a dissociative disorder, we're still largely disconnected in many respects. And so deep tissue body work helps to get you more in your body and connecting with those emotions that are stored. And as those emotions come to the surface, then you can work with the practice chewing up and digesting your lived experiences and emotions. Now, some people, again, having a very limited understanding of their emotional wounding, the dysfunctional dynamics, they can find themselves flooded with the emotions that are surfacing. In that case, that's why a lot of people, at least for a period of time, need psychotherapy to help to gain that cognitive understanding of what they're dealing with. Other interventions like acupuncture helps to balance that
Stimulate.
biochemical. Huh?
Yeah, it helps stimulate and get people move your body differently, the acupuncture.
Yeah, yeah, and, even practices like yoga and
Mhm,
Tai Chi and then homeopathic medicine I found helped me to access a lot of the emotion that was deeply embedded,
mhm.
because a lot of times when we go through a lot of trauma or abuse, there's this numbing, this disconnect. It's like part of us is still in shock. We don't register a lot of what happened. Homeopathic brought a lot of that forward.
There's a book
I've
called "The Body Keeps Score." Have you read that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and the body will remember, it's in your tissues and everything, and you start having all of these health problems inside, and you never quite dealt with that, you know what I mean? The body remembers, though, and it's very fascinating.
Yeah, I was reading a lot of Bessel van der Kolk's work way back. That's a lot of the clinical work I was devouring back then. And I've relied primarily on the Vision Quest because I did have the opportunity to work with some extraordinarily powerful, gifted healers from like
Right.
Brazil and the Philippines, but it's very rare to find people working in this capacity. So I relied primarily on the Vision Quest, going back that 4 days and nights without food and water because more than anything else, this helped me to digest, cycle through a lot of this relational trauma and all that convoluted emotion and I could feel this new foundation taking shape and then that was reflected back to me as relationships evolved and gradually became healthier. So and that's a lot of the process because of having gone through so many vision quests, I work as a conduit to allow this presence to work through me to facilitate this
Yeah,
process for those I work with.
yeah. Yeah. And people don't realize how important it is to get a sense of yourself, and
Yeah.
to tie into yourself. And you said something earlier about you had all these different relationships and you're navigating the people. And I always tell people when they come in my office and they're like, "Why can't I find a nice girl? I keep finding the same thing." I'm like, "Well, none of these people know each other. So there's one common denominator here. It's you." And they really have never thought about it that way. Like maybe the problem is me. It's deep within. And I'm finding what I'm used to, or I'm finding things I need to fix in myself, like you said, and I'm not looking at it because I'm projecting it outward. And that's so hard for people to digest, especially people with trauma, and it affects your whole body.
And there are multiple factors that are
Mhm.
interacting all at once.
Uh-huh.
There's our own emotional wounding. There's also the fact that much of the populace really isn't that healthy.
No.
As I said, most people have not learned to work with their emotional wounding. They've gone through whatever, I don't know percentage wise, but let's say if the percentage of people who suffered whatever emotional, physical, verbal, sexual abuse. So it's quite a significant percentage of the population that has suffered as a result of various forms of trauma, alcoholism, other drug use. That if we grew up in homes, where we had alcoholic parents or that were abusing other substances, something like 15% or so like falls into that category of cluster B personality disorders,
Okay.
narcissism, borderline, all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have an extraordinarily wounded society, human race here, and it varies too. When you're like I do, like living among Native Americans, spending a lot of time in India and Sri Lanka and China. other countries. And so there's different flavors of the psychopathology. There's cultural variations thereof. And so on one hand, yes, there is our own wounding, but at the same time, we get out there and we're in a populace that is, or much the of those out there are themselves wounded. And there's there are other factors too that play into this. We have much less of a sense of community. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages. Okay, with we have so much more information available. When I was struggling with my own attachment wounding, it was very limited what even my psychotherapist at the time, her understanding was limited in these areas. And I'm dating myself, but this is going back into what, the late 90s or so.
We're Generation X.
Yeah. But these days we have much less community. We're interacting through our screens. We have this digital interface through which we engage with other people. Again, there are advantages that there's so much more information available, but we don't spend as much time directly engaged with other people, friends. Years ago, if we were to meet someone, either we were introduced when we were in college, or other community kinds of events where we could meet. But now it's so many people. The only way they're meeting is through dating apps, all that, and so in many respects, it is stunting our personal and interpersonal development. We're just not engaging. We're not seeing someone. And when we meet someone, we're not so much relying upon our intuition, our feeling sense of that person, looking at them, listening to them, feeling through our bodies to understand how we resonate or not resonate. And so it is stunting us developmentally. And there's the fact that we're much less inclined to engage with those around us. We're surrounded by potential partners all the time, and it could be in the supermarket when you're picking out produce or waiting to check out. It could be riding the subway, sitting on an airplane, all kinds of circumstances where that could be the best person we could potentially ever meet in our entire life, but we don't, because we don't engage. We don't talk with them. So many of us don't.
I
And
think it's,
dating apps, go ahead.
they're afraid. People are afraid. They're afraid of wanting something different because they're afraid of getting the same thing. So we don't engage. And that's why we have dating apps too. Takes that barrier away.
But it creates other barriers while doing so. It's like that initial engagement, but there are a lot of factors with the dating apps when we're operating through screens. Is that people lose significance.
Yeah.
There's this illusion of choice,
Yeah.
infinite choice. So we tend to devalue a person, and they become commodified, and people become more disposable. There's a huge difference. As much as possible, and this is what I do, and I encourage people to do so as well, is make an effort on a daily basis to show up more and more fully present. And if we're engaged in, messaging, texting, that involves so little of our senses, and it's easy to misinterpret, and it just doesn't land as deeply in our bodies. It doesn't engage as much of our senses. And so there's a devaluing of the person that comes with that. Okay, then the next step would be like to a voice call. At least you can hear the voice and tone and inflection, all that. And so it starts landing more deeply, and it's evoking more feeling. And it's a lot easier to understand where the person's coming from. Video calls, you have that additional sense, like you're seeing them. Even though you're not directly looking in their eyes, you're seeing their responses and their facial expressions. But as much as possible, whenever possible, get together in person, especially for important discussions. And when I engage with people, and if there's something important, I'm actually working with that practice I described earlier. Like, even in the midst of conversation, I'm connecting with what I feel in my body
Hmm.
and breathing from the depths of the feelings and sensations. And I find it takes me to a deeper level
Right.
in my engagement. And there's this phenomenon called sympathetic resonance. And so as I go to a deeper level, it draws that other person in more deeply.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. So
Wow.
tell me, what do you want to leave the audience with?
I think it's most important to go forward with the mindset of whatever your life experiences is reflecting back to you. Embrace that. Sometimes it's frustrating or stressful, or things are not working as well as you want them to. But if you could take it as like, okay, this is my karma, my life lesson to be learned. How can I work with this and utilize this in order to heal, to grow, to evolve, to become stronger and more fully capable? If you take that mindset and work with the practices such as the one I shared with you, that will help you to chew up, digest a lot of the stress and whatever emotion surface. It's going to engage your brain, your mind's creative problem solving capabilities as you do so, and also make use of the most effective therapeutic interventions, because a lot of that stress and it's trapped in our bodies, a lot of these emotions. We need help to facilitate the healing we cannot fully do on our own.
Hmm. How do people get in touch with you?
There are a number of ways. My main website, benoofana.com. There's a contact form. You can message me. There's my Google Voice number, 332-333-5155. Other websites, teachmetomeditate.com, healmyheartache.com if you're going through all this convoluted relational drama. And especially this goes deeper into healing the attachment wounds, breakup first aid. If you're right in the midst of the ghosting, the relationship has just crashed. You can find me on Instagram. There's my YouTube channel where I do more long form videos.
It sounds like there's a plethora of ways to find you. Thank you so much for coming on this episode of Just Healing. And it was amazing. I know a lot of people are going to learn a little bit about why they do what they do when they date, I hope, and their
Yeah.
trauma and everything. So, but thank you everybody for listening or watching to this episode of Just Healing. If you'd like to learn more, get involved, or find community, visit menhealing.org.